Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Vince Coglianese Show. I am not Vince Coglianese. I'm just a little bit Italian. Explains the nose. My name is Derek Hutter. I'm sitting in for Vince. I'll be in with you till 6. Yeah, 6, unless somebody at management here at the station comes to their senses. Then probably a little bit earlier, but I doubt it. And then I'll be back tomorrow. Because, why? Because everybody else is literally out of town. I am a podcast host. I am a columnist, senior columnist for Town Hall. I'm a columnist for The Hill, author, podcast. Like I say, podcaster. Go ahead and subscribe to that if you'd be so kind. If you just look for my name, you'll find it. We've got a lot of stuff to get to today. It's one of those busy days where you look around and everything is, well, it just keeps on going. You can't say everything has changed, everything is really, everything just keeps on becoming more of what it already was. So that means that the stupid has now squared. Tomorrow it'll be cubed, and then, you're on your own for the weekend. But it is one of, I see Robbie Robertson died. Okay, one of those, he was in, I can't think of a, he's one of those guys where you know his songs. You've probably heard him 10,000 times, but 80 years old. We are entering a time, by the way, where we are going to be losing a whole lot of people that you're not going to be able to handle. Robbie Robertson, to me, okay, it's Robbie Robertson. I know who he is. When you start losing someone like a Paul McCartney, I'm going to need some time. You're going to have to leave me alone. I'm going to have to take some time off. But they're all going to go. That's the horrible thing about life as it is. Anyway, like I say, we've got a lot to get to. Where to start? I've got some amazing audio. I've got some amazing audio of the historic Corinne Jean-Pierre. I've got some audio of Roger. Let's start with Roger Stone. Let's start with the Trump sycophants. I voted for Donald Trump in 2016, sort of reluctantly. I lived in Maryland, so it doesn't really matter. But I came around to the fact that I knew, tells you what I know. I knew that Hillary Diane Rodham Clinton Jr. III was going to win. She was going to be the 45th president of the United States. And I had one child. Did I have one child? No, I was going to have. I think the kid was on the way. And I wanted to be able to tell that kid in the future that I did everything anybody could do in opposition to Hillary Clinton's presidency. And so I went from going to write in one of my cat's names to voting for Donald Trump. And I'm glad that I did. He won. I remember that election night. It was like, oh, my God, can you believe what's going on? But he was a much better president than I ever thought he would be. Way better president than I ever thought he would be. And I say this as a fan of The Apprentice. I say this as a guy, I met him for the first time right after he announced he came to Maryland and did a fundraising dinner, or an annual dinner for the Maryland Republican Party. The only time the Maryland Republican Party wasn't completely worthless. They got Donald Trump to come to it. Fortuitous timing. It had been planned for some time, but they got him out there. And he was, like I say, a much better president than I thought he would be. I do wish that every once in a while he would have turned off the social media just for a bit. I do wish that every once in a while at a press conference, I enjoyed the hell out of the press conferences, don't get me wrong, but every once in a while, instead of just being a jackass, you just say, that's a stupid question. I'm not going to answer. Next question. Move on, rather than engage with the reporters on the terms that the reporters wanted to engage with the president on. He could have told them no and set the terms of engagement in a much more clear way. I would like to have done that. I also would have liked to have him not turn the presidency over to Fauci in the past year and shut down the government, and then whatever. That being said, I happily voted for him again in 2020 because he was a much better president than I thought he would be. He didn't do everything he said he was going to do. He didn't build the wall. He didn't even try to address birthright citizenship, but it was better than what I thought it would be. And so and Joe Biden, I've always known that Joe Biden was a short-tempered, evil little man, and it was abundantly clear that he was senile. Now, it's tough with Joe. You got to always balance. Is it because Joe's senile, or is it because Joe's stupid? No, Joe's been senile for probably the last 5 years, getting worse and worse. But he's been dumb his whole life, so it's tough to know which one you can ascribe any of his actions or sentences to, but it's usually a little from column A, a little from column B. Now that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, I recognize that's a controversial statement with some people, but there's only one president at a time, and there's one person in that office right now, and it's not Donald Trump. Ever since then, the idea of Donald Trump pulling a Grover Cleveland has been floating out there. It's understandable. He feels wronged. He feels slighted. I have no doubt that he, despite literally everybody in his orbit telling him otherwise, I have no doubt, judged by the way that he talks about it constantly, that he believes that he had the 2020 election stolen from him. In many ways, it was, but stolen legally. The government, in a law he signed into being, dumped like $120 billion into election integrity, making sure that voting from home during COVID was easier. In many ways, he signed his own political death certificate. So if he wants to find somebody to blame, he could look to Fauci, he could look to himself. But it was the CARES Act, right? He signed that, and that threw just a ton of money at the stay-at-home voting. Democrats exploited the hell out of it, whether they committed fraud in reality or fraud in principle or just made it so easy to vote that everybody who otherwise wouldn't have voted just filled out the paperwork, and while the person at the door waited for him and gave it to him. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter who does what. It's the L, it's the W at the end. You get the W, you're the president. You get the L, you're not. Donald Trump got the L. So I knew it was a matter of time that he was going to run again. And here he is. And this time he's got a much more formidable opponent than he did, at least this early stage, in 2015. You say, well, wait a second. When Donald Trump entered the race, when Donald Trump entered the race, he was down in single digits, and it was a Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush never had any love. Jeb Bush was the okay Jeb Bush. Hey, here's a whole bunch of people you don't really know anything about. And then you go, wait, I recognize that name. That's why polling this far out is so ridiculously a waste of time. Like, yeah, I know Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush, he's a Bush, right? Yeah, no, I like Jeb. Have you listened to Jeb speak? No, never. I don't know what Jeb isn't the guy who was president, right? That's the kind of level of engagement people have in a year and a half before a general election. So that when people started to pay attention, Jeb fell the way of the dodo and Scott Walker dropped out before anybody could vote. That should not surprise anybody. That happens all the time. You look back at 2008, John McCain was a known commodity, but people didn't want known commodities. So they immediately, John McCain's floor dropped out from underneath him. It was gone. I remember the famous stories of John McCain being spotted by reporters walking through Reagan National Airport, going to campaign events in Iowa and New Hampshire, carrying his own luggage, dragging his own luggage along alone. He was alone because he couldn't afford a staff. He ended up being the nominee. He was a horrible nominee, and history records that he got his rear end handed to him, but it just lets you know that at this point in a primary, it doesn't matter what the polls say. The polls change wildly. Ask President John Kerry. Ask President Howard Dean. Remember how Howard Dean was in... Howard Dean had the whole thing? Oh, Howard Dean, he was running a 50-state strategy as running for the Democratic nomination, but he just had so much money. Everybody was getting behind Howard Dean that he started running campaign ads in places that were like the last states to have primary votes. And like if he was going to be around, then he would have sewn it up. But he was already running a general election campaign, and it didn't work out for him. He lost in Iowa, he lost in New Hampshire, and then he screamed, and that was it. One bad microphone moment, and he was done. Thank God, because he turned out, everybody knew he was kind of a lefty and a nutty lefty, but ever since he became like an MSNBC contributor, he went absolutely nuts. You're like, thank God. You're like, just like it, like I'm not a big fan of Mitch McConnell, but I will forever be grateful for the existence of Mitch McConnell because Merrick Garland is not currently a justice on the Supreme Court. Were it not for Mitch McConnell, were it for if anybody else probably were in charge of Republicans in Congress, I don't know that they could have taken the heat that Mitch McConnell took. I don't know that they would have taken the heat that Mitch McConnell took. And we likely would have Merrick Garland sitting on the Supreme Court. So when you look at this election right now, judging what's going to happen by what's happening now is folly. That being said, I am a big fan of most of our side, everybody on our side, aiming their shots at the other trench rather than down our trench. Not a big fan of having to worry about whether or not the person next to you is going to shoot you. I'm worried about the guy on the other side of no man's land, or I guess the nondescript biped on the other side of no person's land, or whatever the hell the left calls it now. So when I see the attacks on Ron DeSantis, now this is weird because I've had many an argument with people in the Trump orbit. And a lot of people in the Trump orbit are financially dependent on Trump. He's not paying them. They are making money off of people because of their proximity off of Trump. They're getting jobs, whatever it is. They're running super PACs. They're getting contractors and contributor jobs and whatever it is. They are fully dependent on being in Trump's orbit and Trump being in a position to matter. I wish Trump would do sort of a, if you're not helping me, you're hurting me kind of purge. But he just, I don't think he sees it as a problem. So you got a lot of people, and I've had arguments with them, like they're saying you Ron DeSantis and whoever else is criticizing. It's always Ron DeSantis because that's who they're most afraid of. But they're criticizing, he's attacking Trump, and that's just not going to fly with Trump supporters. It's a wrong tactic. It's a huge mistake. Stop talking. Stop doing. Like, okay, fine. Like, I get it. You don't like it. I get it. You don't like it. But then why is it okay when Donald Trump does it to DeSantis supporters? Because whoever ends up being the nominee is going to need the votes of the other people's supporters. Asa Hutchinson's 2 family members who support him, you're going to need their votes if you're going to plan to win the general election, which ultimately I would like to think is everybody's goal, is it not? So if it's wrong and you say, well, Ron DeSantis shouldn't be criticizing Donald Trump, he can't be criticizing Donald Trump, he's just going to alienate Trump supporters, why is there no correlating, well, Donald Trump then shouldn't be lying about Ron DeSantis, shouldn't be saying that Andrew Cuomo was a better governor related to COVID, things like that. Maybe you don't do, because eventually, if Trump is the nominee, theoretically, if he has a strategy to win the general election, I assume it would involve getting as many votes as humanly possible. And since humans are the people supporting other candidates running for president, their votes count just as much as anybody else's, that you'd want their votes. Why is there no such concern? And there is no good answer to that, other than they've got their orders. Not allowed to talk about Donald Trump. You can't criticize Donald Trump, but you have to criticize everybody else because that's what Trump wants, anybody he sees as a threat. So along those lines, Roger Stone was giving an interview, some podcast, I don't know what it is, doesn't matter. And he said something so patently ridiculous that I have to play it for you because it's just one of those things where you're like, this doesn't make any sense. Now, Roger Stone is not somebody I'd personally look to if I'm trying to fill, the Bible's full of political truths. It's not somebody I'd go to for the truth. He's a political operative. He's a political animal. There's absolutely a place for him in every political campaign, and people like him in every political campaign. It's just not somebody you'd say, hey, I'm going out of town. Would you, I don't know, water my house plants? probably not the way if you want the houseplants to live. So when you hear this, I want you to pay particular attention to the money aspect. He's trying desperately to smear Ron DeSantis. And I'm sure there's plenty to smear Ron DeSantis on, but this ain't one of them. This is like an attack that is, it's an insult to the intelligence of the people listening to it. So we shall see if you agree with me on that, but I'm looking at the clock. Hold on, welcome back. And yes, I know. I get all the messages and the tweets and everything. Oh, you're just, okay. Yeah, I'm not telling you what to believe and not to believe about the 2020 election, but I am telling you that no matter what you believe, there's a reality, and it's that Joe Biden is the president of the United States. You can be mad about that, but don't be mad at me for pointing it out. The sun rises in the east. You can get pissed at me about that. I didn't do it. So you can get mad. Everybody is so sensitive. You can't just talk about these things like adults sometimes, because everybody's so invested emotionally in it. And I can tell you, having written a book about this subject, when you get emotional, you become irrational. You do. You ever wonder why the left is constantly making emotional appeals rather than logical arguments? Because that's why. How many things in your life that you've done have you apologized for that you did whilst completely sober and thinking rationally about what you were doing? Probably none. But other ones, you likely did. And it was when you were in an emotional state, when you were worked up, and you weren't thinking rationally. You're kind of a jerk. And you go, oh, geez, I probably shouldn't have done that. Well, you probably shouldn't have done that. Anyway, we'll get to that audio of Roger Stone on the other side of news. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and all the weird stuff in between. Democrats insist is real. Oh, boy, I'm Derek Hunter, sitting in for Vince Coglianese, who's off, I believe, for the rest of the week. So he's out traveling the country. It's always good to get outside the Beltway, just like it's always good to get outside of a pool. You get a pool. Oh, I love spending all day in the pool. Well, at a certain point, you become all pruny and start to feel weird and start to taste chlorine. It's time to get out of the pool. And the same way with the swamp in D.C. You just got to get out of it every once in a while. Just get back. Treat it like an M80 where you're not sure. There's some smoking going on there, but you're not sure if the fuse is lit. There's not much of a fuse left. You just back away slowly and you go, you know what? We'll come back to that one. Anyway, talking about Roger Stone. So now I want to play you this Roger Stone audio and show you something that is counterproductive and an insult to the intelligence of people who not only are fans of Ron DeSantis, but are fans of Donald Trump, are fans of anybody, or fans of reality. And it's just a common sense thing. You know, I don't care who you vote for, as long as it's not a Democrat. I don't care who you vote for. If you're the one person out there who goes, man, I wish Larry Hogan would get in the race. Well, if you're that person, hi, Larry Hogan. But otherwise, I honestly don't care. But if you have, and I have the same problem with Democrats, I have the same problem with Joe Biden in the White House. If you have such a great case to make, why do you have to lie? If all the facts are on your side, why do you have to lie? And they lie. If Joe Biden's life is so impressive, why does he have to lie about it? Right? He was a United States senator longer than, I don't know, the life expectancy was 100 years ago. That's an accomplishment in and of itself, that he was there and basically a seat filler. There's a fetish for you. But he was basically a seat filler and had one thing that he hung his hat on throughout he tried to stop Clarence Thomas from getting on the Supreme Court, but that didn't work out. All the lies in the books. And when you partner with Teddy Kennedy to say, you're wrong with women, knowing that Tara Reid exists now just makes it even more sickening. But you probably don't have a whole lot of case to go. The only other thing he hung his hat on as, he always said he was a foreign policy expert, but frankly, the federal government, the Congress, has little to nothing to do with foreign policy. And even his allies have said he's been notoriously wrong on everything related to foreign policy his whole life. But he claimed to have been the author of the crime bill, the 1994 crime bill. It was a big deal. Democrats were super proud of it at the time. It ended up being something that Joe Biden had to apologize for when he ran for president in 2020. Why? Because Democrats had decided that punishing criminals was now the real crime. Punishing criminals was the real crime. And they ran around saying mass incarceration, particularly mass incarceration of black men. There was no concern as to whether or not the black men who were incarcerated were guilty or not. Didn't matter. Nobody at all on the left was concerned with, say, a little crazy group of people called the victims of those criminals, which were also, you're much more likely to be a victim of a crime from somebody who looks pretty damn close to you than anything else. It doesn't matter what you look like, what you see reflecting back upside down to you in the spoon as you eat your morning cereal. If you are going to be a victim of a crime, the odds are 80 to 90% that the person who does whatever it is going to look a hell of a lot like you, just like you, as a matter of fact. Nope, Democrats don't care about that either. They decided that people should not be in prison. Why? Because they love to pander based on race. The alternative would be to put forth real policy solutions, and they don't really like to talk about what they want to put forth. They just prefer to sneak it in or have courts decree it to be. So the left is now out there lying, and that's what they do. We don't have to be like that. We do have the truth on our side. If you don't have the truth on your side, if the truth won't do, then maybe you need to, rethink your tactic. That brings us back to Roger Stone, his podcast interview, talking about Ron DeSantis. Roger Stone owes Donald Trump a lot. He pardoned him. And Roger makes a lot of money off of the proximity to Trump. And I imagine a whole bunch of candidates who are favorable to Trump for various offices, they contract with Roger Stone. They'd be foolish not to. And, frankly, you needed somebody. If you're running for a big enough office, you kind of need somebody like a Roger Stone. You need somebody to put thumbtacks on the seats of your opponents. But there are ways to do it that don't look absurd and ways to do it that do look absurd. And this way is absurd. We'll talk about it after, but I assume you'll be able to spot it when he says it. Cut one. Go ahead.
I have a very good friend in Palm Beach, a great guy, older guy, retired, made some serious money in the construction industry. He gave $30,000 to the Friends of Ron DeSantis. He was doing that to support the re-election of Ron DeSantis. He now finds that money that organization had a change of its name to some generic name. Right. People for the American way, who knows? Truth, justice in the American way. And then that money was transferred to the Never Stand Down PAC. Well, that's not how he wanted his money spent. He doesn't want his money spent opposing Donald Trump. He contributed to Ron DeSantis' re-election. At least that's what he thought.
Did you catch it or not? He contributed $30,000. He wanted to re-elect Ron DeSantis. But now this money is somehow miraculously, through a series of banking magic, I don't know who the accountant is here, maybe it's David Copperfield, but it's now gone to DeSantis for president. The only problem is, and it's a big problem, is logically, Ron DeSantis was reelected last year. So theoretically, this donation, if it was to help, in fact, with the reelection of Ron DeSantis, would have taken place in 2022, maybe 2021, but at a minimum 2022. Ron DeSantis is term limited for governor. That's it. He's got his one term in. Now he's in his second term. He can't run for governor again. So there's no way on God's green earth that this donation to reelect Ron DeSantis, unless this guy is a special kind of stupid, came after the 2022 election, right? He's just won re-election. I want to make sure he gets reelected again in a state where he can't get reelected again. I want to here's $30,000. Doesn't make any sense, does it? It makes zero sense. So then that leaves you with only the possibility that this money was given before the 2022 election, in which case it was spent on the 2022 election, making everything there that Roger Stone is saying make zero sense whatsoever. It just doesn't make any sense. I'm sure, I don't live in Florida, but I'm sure there are plenty of things that you can go and complain about Ron DeSantis about. But this one doesn't make any sense, right? You could even lie and say and go about the curriculum. Oh, he doesn't want Black history taught. He doesn't want this. He's saying there's good stuff in slavery. You can make that lie. At least it's sort of based in something that on its face, if you don't read the curriculum or even just that one page with that one sentence in it, you could go, I really shouldn't. You take it completely out of context compared to the rest of the 200 pages. You go, that doesn't make any sense. What's going on here? Ron DeSantis owes me an explanation. But this thing, if you just think about it logically, I gave money to reelect Ron DeSantis, and it went to his presidential campaign. How's that possible? The committee to reelect Ron DeSantis governor of Florida no longer exists after the 2022 election. There's no point to it. Now, maybe your solicitation for donation got lost in the mail somewhere, and right when you're filling out the Christmas cards, you go, wait, what's this in the mail? They're asking for money for Ron DeSantis, and you unthinkingly and unknowingly go, you know what, I'm going to break off $30K just for the hell of it. Maybe. I doubt it. Seems impossible. Seems improbable. There aren't too many self-made multimillionaires who can afford to break off $30K and give it to a politician who are also wildly stupid at the same time. It just doesn't happen all that much. But it's possible, I suppose. But if you notice, Roger Stone doesn't give the guy's name. Why not? Because maybe he, I don't know, Unicorn McBoatface or something like that. I don't know what this person's name would be. A good way to spot a lie is people get very specific about things that can't be checked. But they're not specific at all. They're vague. They avoid completely things that can be checked. They tell you, oh, he lives in Palm Beach. Made a lot of money in the construction industry down there. Very successful person. Loves Ron DeSantis. Wrote $30,000 check. No name. Nothing. Now, this person should be, if it's true, or they cut this check late, or whatever. If there's a truth to this story, whatever it could be, I can't imagine what it could be for reasons I just laid out. But if there is a truth to this story, this person should be pissed. This person should be very upset. This person should then go public, should they not? And go, hey, wait, if you really want to, if you're a good friend of Roger Stone's and you really want Donald Trump to win the nomination, here's a perfect opportunity to say this guy's running some kind of scam on people. And I want my $30,000 back. Think of the news stories. My God, that would dominate MSNBC's news cycle for that day. Major DeSantis donor demands refund, claims misappropriation of funds. Hell, there's probably some blogger for Joy Reid already got that saved in their drafts. They're just waiting for somebody to step forward. Like I say, there are plenty, and talking about the Trump people in Trump's orbit. Why is that okay? Why is that okay? Why is saying that Andrew Cuomo was a better governor during COVID than Ron DeSantis was? How is that okay? But if you dare say anything that could be interpreted as being less than absolutely favorable to Trump, you're running risk of alienating every single Trump supporter. I deal with it. I get the emails. I see the tweets. I'm just honest. I hate hypocrisy. I don't care who does it. But you sit there and you say something like, this just doesn't make any sense. And they come after you, going, how dare you? You can't do this. What are you doing? You're a sellout. You're a this. You're a that. You're the other thing. And like, all right, look, I'm not going to get invited to your Christmas party. That's fine with me. I don't care. I just find it much easier to remember the truth and to say what I really believe and remember what I really, like if I'm going to adjust what I say, if I'm Bill Clinton, who made a point of being able to identify, quote unquote, identify with everybody he was talking, any audience he was talking to, under any circumstance, he found a way to identify with them. He was always full of it. He didn't care, but he found a way to identify them. If I found a way to identify with people, and I found, like, this is what they want to hear. This is what people want to hear, so I'll just say it to them. Well, at some point in the future, it's going to be inconvenient, and I'm going to say something else if it's not what I believe. I find it much easier just to say what you believe, because the truth is a much easier story to remember. And I say that not as a saint. I'm not patting myself on the back. In my life, I've lied plenty. And you do. You run around in your teenage years and your 20s, and you're going, okay, you lie to make yourself look cool. You lie to whatever, and then you go, well, who did I tell which lie to? And you kind of forget. And every once in a while, you come across somebody who looks at you with a little bit of a cross eye and goes, didn't you say, I thought you said last month that it was this, and now you're saying it's that. Like, no. That's not what I meant. That's not. It's just easier the truth is a much easier story to remember. So just remember that. Nobody running for president, Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, on down to whoever thinks they're holier than thou, none of them are unable to take a bath because they can't sink in water. None of them are holy. None of them are perfect. They're all people, and most importantly, and never forget this, they're all politicians. Every single one of them is a politician. You go, oh, no. This one isn't a politician. If you're running for president, you're a politician. If you've been president, you're a politician. If you've run for governor of California, no matter how badly you got your rear end handed to you, you're a politician. That's just the way the world works. If you're trying to convince people to give you their vote, you're a politician. That's what politicians do. You should make them work their asses off to get your vote. Blind loyalty to a politician is insane. Blind loyalty to any politician is insane because they never give it back. They never give it back. You've got to hold them to their feet to the fire, and if you're lucky, you'll get a politician that you agree with 60% of the time. That'll be a good one, 60% of the time. And if you're really lucky, that 60% of the time, they'll do maybe 10% of that if they get into office. Why? Because that's all they can do. That's the way our government is set up. Our government is not set up for sweeping, dramatic changes constantly. Not yet. Democrats will screw it up and try and turn the Senate into the House with fewer members and get rid of the filibuster, and then it will be. But until then, we are in a place where maybe the first 100 days a president can get a couple of agenda items through. Not super big ones, maybe one big one, a couple small-sized ones, and then it's already into the midterm cycle. That's why Donald Trump did what he did, but he didn't do a whole lot. If you look at it, he didn't do a whole lot. And actually, if you look at it from an economic standpoint, before COVID, things were obviously much better than they are now. But they were much better than they are now, largely because Democrats couldn't get what they wanted done. The government not being able to do bad things is almost the best that we could do. I know. You're sitting there and you're gripping your steering wheel. Well, what about the Trump tax cuts? What about... Those were good. Those were positive for the economy and all together. But not particularly good for the middle class. What do you mean? Everybody got a tax... Everybody did get a tax cut. But if you're making $50,000 a year and you get a $1,000 tax cut, that's good. That's good. You get to keep more of your money. That's awesome. But if you go $1,000 divided by, well, let's just say $1,000 divided by 26, assuming that you're paid every 2 weeks, by 26, that's not a whole lot of money per pay period. It's just not. It's $38.46 per pay period. Great. But you will eventually, and very quickly in short order, get used to that money. I think one of the mistakes that Trump made in 2020 was running on what he'd done rather than what he'd do. Elections are about what you're going to do next. Elections are not generally rewards for good behavior in the past. George H.W. Bush would have won in a walk in 1992 if it was about things he'd done and how wonderful it was. It was, what did you do? You lied about taxes, and now what are you going to do going forward? He said, I've read Saddam Hussein. Okay, great. Donald Trump talked a lot about he's going to finish the wall, which was an acknowledgement that he didn't build the wall, and then he was going to, that he gave us tax cuts. But what are you going to do next? That's what you got to focus on as a candidate. I'd like to see all the candidates talk about what they're going to do. What a nice change of pace that would be. Man, time flies. 1 hour down, 2 more to go. So much to get to. Stick around. You're not going to want to miss a minute of it. You're listening to the Vince Coglianese Show. I'm Derek Hunter, sitting in.